Imagine the person you love most in the entire world is killed in just a horrific accident.
Right, an absolute nightmare.
Yeah. And now imagine that years later, the person responsible for that death, they just return to your town.
Just shows back up.
Exactly. And society or, biology tells you that you have to hand over your grandchild to her.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It feels absolutely impossible,
Yeah.
right? Like, how do you reconcile that raw hatred you feel with this societal expectation of empathy?
You really can't. Not easily, anyway.
Right. So welcome to today's deep dive. I am so thrilled to have you riding shotgun with us today as we navigate, honestly, one of the most complex emotional landscapes we've ever covered.
It really is. It's incredibly heavy.
We are unpacking excerpts from Colleen Hoover's novel, Reminders of Him. And our mission today is to sort of deconstruct this masterclass in moral ambiguity.
Yeah, which she does so well.
She really does. We're going to look at exactly how an author engineers our empathy, right? Like forcing us to sympathize with a character who committed an unforgivable mistake.
And at the same time, making us root for the people trying to keep her away from her own daughter.
Yes. It's such a wild tension.
It's a phenomenal tightrope walk of narrative design, really, because what we're analyzing here isn't just a contemporary romance.
Right, which is the shelf this book usually it's placed on.
Exactly, but it's so much more than that. This material is a profound, messy, almost surgical study of grief. Communal grief, specifically.
Communal grief. I like that.
Yeah, it explores the highly subjective nature of forgiveness, and it forces you into those impossible, agonizing, gray areas of human redemption.
Where nobody is entirely evil, but nobody is innocent either.
Precisely. Nobody's operating from pure malice. Everyone is just hurting.
So let's jump right into the architecture of that empathy right off the bat. Starting with our protagonist, Kenna Rowan.
Okay.
She's returning to town after serving 5 years in prison for involuntary manslaughter. And the author does not waste a single sentence before dropping us into the crushing weight of her reality.
No, she really doesn't.
Right. One of the very first actions Kenna takes upon returning is pulling a wooden memorial cross for her deceased boyfriend, Scotty, straight out of the ground.
Just right on the side of the road.
Exactly. And on the surface, to anyone driving by, that looks like vandalism.
Oh, absolutely.
But we quickly learn she does it because she knows Scotty would have hated it.
Which is such a brilliant mechanism to establish intimacy right away.
Yeah. How so?
Well, by having her remove that cross, the narrative immediately signals to you, the listener, that Kenna knew the victim better than the town that's currently judging her.
Oh, wow. That's a great point. The town put up this generic symbol.
Exactly. The town erected a symbol, but Kenna understands the specific human being.
Right.
But that intimate knowledge only highlights her current alienation.
Right. Because she's so alone.
Yeah, I wouldn't even just call it isolation. I'd call it like an architectural quarantine.
Architectural quarantine. That's heavy.
It really is. Every location she's allowed to occupy upon her return is designed by society to keep her invisible and completely powerless.
And that quarantine is so vividly drawn in the source material. Like, she moves into a place called the Paradise Apartments, which
is definitely not a paradise.
Not at all. It's flanked by an abandoned car lot and this dingy convenience store. It is grim.
Yeah.
And the power dynamics she immediately faces are just staggering. Like, take her interaction with the landlord, Ruth.
Oh, man. Yeah.
Kenna is virtually penniless, right?
Yeah.
And Ruth leverages that desperation by forcing Kenna to take in a stray, crying kitten just in exchange for waiving a $250 electricity deposit.
Right. And Hoover is showing us the mechanics of systemic vulnerability there.
Yeah, totally.
Kenna's living conditions literally depend on her willingness to be a dumping ground for a stray animal, mostly because society views her as a stray herself.
Wow. Yeah, it's a transaction completely devoid of basic human dignity.
Exactly.
And, it doesn't get better when she tries to find work. She has to disclose her prison record just to get a minimum wage job bagging groceries. Though there is a really fascinating detail there. The grocery store manager, Amy, actually ends up bonding with Kenna.
Yeah, specifically over the reality of prison versus how it's, portrayed on TV shows.
Right. I found that so interesting.
It is. That conversation with Amy serves a very specific purpose. It forces us to confront our own media-driven biases.
How we think prison is, basically.
Exactly. We're conditioned by television to view incarceration through this lens of high drama, violence, sensationalism.
Right. Riots and all that.
Yeah. But Kenna's reality of prison was just dull, crushing bureaucracy and profound loneliness.
Yeah, the boredom of it.
By having Amy ask those questions, the author breaks down the sensationalized idea of the ex-con. She replaces it with the mundane, depressing reality of a woman who just lost 5 years of her life.
And during those 5 years, her only real coping mechanism was writing these heartbreaking, unsent letters to Scotty.
Yes, the letters are brutal.
They really are.
Yeah.
And this is where the author really turns the screws on our empathy. Because through these letters, we hear about her time in what she refuses to call prison.
Right. She only calls it the facility.
Exactly. She recounts this visceral, just agonizing memory of when her breast milk came in. For the baby, she had just given birth to the baby she wasn't allowed to keep.
Oh, it's so hard to read.
It is. She's hiding in a prison library, leaking through her uniform, completely shattered. And another inmate, Ivy, finds her and delivers this brutal but life-saving advice.
Right.
She tells Kenna she can either live in her sadness or die in it.
And look at how the author uses biology there to just bypass our moral judgment.
Yeah, that's so true.
Before we even fully understand the details of the crime she committed, we're presented with the physical manifestation of a mother's loss.
Right, the breast milk.
Yeah. A leaking breast is a biological imperative. It can't be reasoned with or punished away.
It's just a raw bodily function.
Exactly. By stripping Kenna of everything, money, support, freedom, and finally, the physical connection to her child, the narrative forces you to see her naked, bleeding humanity first.
It effectively resets the baseline of how we evaluate her.
It really does.
You know, I was looking at this entire setup kind of like a reverse prison break.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, usually the tension in a story is about breaking out of confinement. But Kenna is trying to break into her own life.
Oh, yeah.
She's technically served her time, but the walls keeping her out of daughter DM's life are infinitely thicker than the concrete walls of the facility.
That's a great analogy.
Thanks. But let me push back on this a little bit.
Sure.
By stacking the deck so heavily with this environmental and biological bleakness, is the author just emotionally manipulating us? Like, is she just weaponizing our pity so we ignore the fact that Kenna killed someone?
That's a valid challenge, honestly. But I'd argue it's not merely pity, it's strategic alignment.
Okay, unpack that for me.
If Hoover simply told us Kenna felt bad, we might still hold her at arm's length.
Right, because of the crime.
Right. But by aligning our sensory experience with her raw, visceral suffering, the author ensures that when the messy details of her crime finally collide with her present reality, we don't just reduce her to a label.
A criminal.
Exactly. We're forced to view her as a complex human being who is just starved for connection.
Starved for connection, which perfectly transitions us to a connection she definitely did not see coming.
Oh boy, here we go.
Because Kenna's attempt to find a quiet sanctuary from her thoughts leads her straight into the epicenter of her past.
Right into it.
Yeah, she goes to her old favorite bookstore, seeking comfort, only to discover it's been gutted. It's converted into a bar called Ward's.
Right.
And there she meets the bartender, Ledger.
And this sequence at the bar is just a masterclass in sensory contrast.
It really is. Kenna sits down and orders a coffee, fully expecting some bitter, watery prison coffee.
Yep.
But Ledger crafts this incredibly elaborate, bougie coffee for her. He uses whole milk, whipped cream, he even puts a cherry on top.
Yeah, he really goes all out.
And this tiny, mundane beverage literally brings Kenna to tears after years of nothing.
Notice how Hoover uses the sensory details of that coffee to biologically short-circuit Kenna's trauma.
Wow, yeah.
This isn't just a scene establishing a romance, it's demonstrating the mechanics of human starvation.
Like you said earlier.
Right. When a person is starved of basic dignity and choice for 5 years, a cup of coffee isn't just a drink, it's a lifeline.
It's proof she still exists.
Exactly. It's proof that she's still in the world and worthy of care. Ledger doesn't know her, but he sees her. And that sparks this profound magnetic pull between them.
And they end up in his truck in the alley behind the bar. And the physical chemistry is just off the charts.
Oh, yeah.
But then the author takes this classic meet-cute romance trope and turns it into an absolute psychological ticking time bomb.
It's terrifying.
It really is. He whispers his name, Ledger. And in a fraction of a second, Kenna realizes that the man she's kissing is Scotty's best friend.
The man who would have been her brother-in-law.
Right. And then she looks around and realizes she is sitting in the exact same ugly orange Ford F-250 that Scotty used to pick her up in on their very first date.
The realization is just
She goes into a full panic attack and just flees into the night.
Yeah, that orange truck is no longer just a vehicle. It suddenly becomes a mobile ghost.
A mobile ghost, wow.
And what we're experiencing here is the sheer narrative power of dramatic irony. We, the listeners, quickly piece together exactly why this connection is doomed before Ledger even knows her real name.
Right. He just knows her as Nicole, this sad, intriguing woman from his bar.
Exactly.
But, this raises a fascinating question for me about what is actually happening in that truck.
Okay.
Is Ledger genuinely attracted to this stranger named Nicole? Or is he subconsciously recognizing the biological pieces of his best friend and his surrogate daughter inside of this woman?
That's the real question.
Because later in the source material, he explicitly notes how much Kenna's sad expressions mirror Diem's.
Yes, and that is the exact psychological labyrinth Ledger is trapped inside.
Right.
He feels this inexplicable gravitational pull toward her. But what he is very likely sensing is the biological echo of the little girl he loves more than anything.
Wow. The biological echo.
Yeah, he's drawn to the phantom presence of Diem. And that's why, when he finally discovers Kenna's true identity, that intense attraction instantly sours into the most profound sense of betrayal.
Right, because the dramatic irony is doing all the heavy lifting.
Exactly. It makes you squirm in your seat because you can see this devastating collision coming from miles away.
And that biological pull Ledger feels makes perfect sense when you step back and look at his role in the Landry family.
It really does.
Ledger isn't just a bartender who misses his best friend. He is the primary protector of Kenna's biological daughter.
Yeah.
He's fundamentally intertwined with Scotty's parents, Patrick and Grace, and they have constructed this impenetrable, fiercely guarded bubble around little Diem.
Ledger has completely assumed the role of surrogate father, and the author builds that reality not through these grand declarations, but through deeply specific, mundane acts of caretaking.
Oh, the details with Diem are incredible. Ledger coaches her t-ball team.
Yes.
And Diem is this hilarious, chaotic force of nature. She pockets the t-balls during practice, and deadpan tells Ledger that they are dragon eggs from Walmart.
Right, and that you have to cook them with salt and shampoo.
Yes, it's so funny. And she flat out refuses to wear baseball cleats, demanding to wear bright red cowboy boots instead.
And Ledger just completely surrenders to it.
He lets her wear the boots.
Right. And that isn't just cute filler to make Ledger look like a nice guy.
No.
No. Hoover is establishing Ledger's complete devotion to protecting this child's magic. He doesn't correct her about the dragon eggs. He guards her innocence.
Ah, I see.
Which is vital context for understanding why he's so violently opposed to letting Kenna anywhere near her. To Ledger, Kenna represents the brutal, destructive reality that will inevitably crush those dragon eggs.
Wow, yeah.
His loyalty to his people is absolute. We see it with his employees, too, silently celebrating his bartender Roman sobriety by buying him a new, unique coffee mug every single week.
Yeah, he's on, Mud 96?
Exactly. Ledger is a structural, load-bearing pillar for everyone in his life.
But his caretaking of the Landry family requires maintaining this massive, fragile fiction.
It really does.
Patrick and Grace legally adopted Diem and terminated Kenna's rights while she was incarcerated.
Yeah.
And they lied to Diem about her mother.
Yeah, that part is so sad.
When Diem asks why her mother doesn't live with them, Grace panics and tells her it's because her car isn't big enough.
Oh, man.
It's such an absurd, silly lie, but it reveals so much.
It reveals a profound inadequacy in the face of trauma. You have to understand the depth of the Landry's nightmare.
Right.
They lost their kind, perfect son because of Kenna's actions. Kenna was driving, she flipped the car, and in a state of shock and fear, she fled the scene.
Leaving Scotty to crawl toward the road and bleed to death over several agonizing hours.
Right.
It's unthinkable.
It is a horrific reality to carry. And I kind of think of Patrick and Grace's survival like a fragile Jenga tower.
Absolutely.
Diem is the single foundational piece keeping them standing. If Kenna pulls that piece, they just collapse.
Their psychological immune system has gone completely into overdrive. Diem is the healthy, vital tissue they're desperately trying to protect.
And they view Kenna as a deadly pathogen.
Exactly. If they let Kenna in even a millimeter, their psychological immune system will attack itself and shut down completely.
So I have to ask, when Ledger discovers who Kenna is, Is his fierce hatred actually about getting justice for Scotty, or is it purely about preventing Grace and Patrick's immune system from collapsing?
I think it's almost entirely the latter.
Really?
Yeah, Ledger's anger is a necessary proxy for Landry's pain.
Yeah.
In the aftermath of a senseless, chaotic tragedy, human beings often require a clear, unambiguous villain just to survive the injustice of the loss.
Right, it gives the ambient rage a physical target. Exactly. Kenna serves as that vital villain for their ongoing survival. If they allow themselves to see her as a complex, grieving, broken human being, it complicates their grief.
It's infinitely safer to just hate a monster.
Precisely.
But a psychological immune system that rigid is bound to attack when the pathogen breaches the perimeter.
Damn breaches, she does.
Yeah. That collision happens when Kenna finally attempts to cross the street just to get a glimpse of her daughter.
She doesn't even want to speak to her.
Right. She just wants to look. She brings this cheap little rubber starfish toy she bought at a gas station, and she doesn't even make it to the front door before Ledger intercepts her.
And the interception is brutal.
It really is.
He uses his physical size to force her away from the property. He threatens to call the police, completely coldly dismissing her desperate, hyperventilating pleas just to see her child's face.
He practically drags her back to his house just to hide her existence from the Landrys. The tension is suffocating.
It's so hard to read.
But what is truly fascinating is how the fallout of that confrontation is handled. Ledger's employee, Roman Aaron, the guy with the 96 coffee mugs, actually steps in and plays devil's advocate.
Yeah, thank goodness for Roman.
Right. Roman calls Ledger out on his hypocrisy. He reminds Ledger that Kenna isn't a serial killer. She was a terrified young girl who made a fatal mistake, served a harsh sentence, and lost both the man she loved and her baby in one night.
Roman is an essential narrative device in this sequence. He essentially grabs the microphone on behalf of you, the listener.
We're all yelling at Ledger.
Exactly. We are metaphorically screaming at Ledger to have some basic empathy, and Roman verbalizes it.
Right.
He challenges the rigidity of Ledger's black and white worldview, pointing out that Ledger is a man who prides himself on giving people second chances. I mean, he literally gave Roman a second chance at life.
So why is Kenna excluded from that grace? And that confrontation plants a seed of agonizing guilt in Ledger. He actually drives back to Kenna's dismal apartment complex that night to check on her, terrified that his cruelty might push her to self-harm.
Yeah.
But instead of finding her crying, he finds her sitting in the grass, lighting sparklers with her teenage neighbor who has Down syndrome, Lady Diana.
Such a powerful scene.
Kenna is forcing herself to smile, meticulously masking her crushing grief, just to bring a moment of joy to this girl. And Ledger sits in his truck watching this, and his brain essentially short circuits.
Right, because she is acting like a deeply kind person, not the monster he desperately needs her to be.
Yeah.
It completely shatters his cognitive dissonance. He cannot reconcile the villain in his head with the gentle woman holding the sparkler.
And that internal tension finally boils over in the most mundane setting possible, the local grocery store.
Of course.
Ledger goes in to buy groceries, and Kenny's the cashier bagging them.
It has to be one of the most agonizingly awkward transactions in modern literature.
Absolutely. Ledger is buying cans of SpaghettiOs specifically for DM, and Kenna has to scan them, radiating this quiet, devastating jealousy over a can of pasta.
Over SpaghettiOs.
Yeah. And as he's leaving, Kenna secretly steals a cheap pink scrunchie out of the bed of his truck.
Right.
Why? Because it has a single tiny strand of DM's hair attached to it. It absolutely breaks your heart.
That stolen scrunchie is the ultimate symbol of maternal desperation.
It really is.
It perfectly encapsulates the profound moral ambiguity at the core of this deep dive. From a legal and practical standpoint, Kenna has absolutely zero rights.
None. The courts terminated them.
Right. The family moved on. But emotionally, biologically, her yearning for a single strand of her child's hair is a universally understood human imperative.
I do want to challenge Kenna's perspective here, though.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because she operates on a very specific philosophy of motherhood. In the source material, she reflects heavily on her own childhood.
Yeah.
She had a biological mother who was entirely neglectful.
Right, leaving her alone for weeks at a time.
Yeah, left her to fend for herself. But she also spent time in the foster system with a woman named Mona. Now, Mona wasn't magical. She wasn't overly affectionate or warm.
No, she's just practical.
Right. But she did the laundry, and she made sure dinner was on the table. Kenna comes to the conclusion that a child doesn't actually need a spectacular, perfect mother. They just need an adequate one who stays present.
Precisely. Her entire operational baseline is, Just be adequate. Keep the child alive. Do not abandon them.
Yeah.
Because of her trauma, the bar is set incredibly low.
Right. So if we put you, the listener, in the position of judging this dilemma, Kenna truly believes that because she is capable of being an adequate mother, she inherently deserves a place in Diem's life.
Yes.
But does she? Does Kenna actually have the right to detonate Diem's perfectly safe, happy, and stable life with the Landrys just to heal her own gaping trauma?
And this is where the source material refuses to offer a clean, sanitized answer.
It's so messy.
It is. If Kenna forces her way into Diem's life, she risks completely destroying the mental health of the grandparents who are the foundation of Diem's world.
Right.
But if she is perpetually banished, we are watching a mother undergo endless psychological torture. True justice in this scenario might actually require the agonizing, unglamorous work of empathy from every single party.
Oh, wow.
It requires Ledger and the Landrys to accept that the woman who destroyed their universe is also a human being worthy of grace.
Which is a huge ask.
And conversely, it requires Kenna to accept the devastating reality that her mere presence is a weapon.
Man, it is incredibly heavy. You know, to give everyone a final sense of exactly what was lost in that car crash, there is this specific memory Kenna details in one of her letters to Scotty.
Oh, the rings.
Yeah. Long before the tragedy, they were walking down the street window shopping, and Kenna stopped to admire this stunning $4,000 antique ring.
Right.
Scotty obviously couldn't afford it. So instead, he went into a novelty store and bought 10 tiny, cheap rubber hands from a gag gift display.
It's so sweet.
It is. He placed one on each of her fingers, and then he kissed the palm of every single little rubber hand, promising her that one day he would figure out a way to buy real rings for all 50 of her fingers.
It is a breathtakingly tragic detail. It encapsulates what Kenna refers to as the American reality.
Yeah.
They had this beautiful, absurd, blissful dream of a future together, and it was entirely permanently erased by one catastrophic decision.
And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into reminders of him today. Colleen Hoover engineers this incredible, suffocating tension by utilizing dramatic irony, the psychological weight of hidden identities, and pitting the absolute rights of a grieving family against the undeniable biological desperation of a mother.
She really does.
It holds a mirror up to how we navigate judgment in our own lives, you know? Like, how often do we define people entirely by the absolute worst mistake they ever made without ever considering the invisible prisons they are trying to claw their way out of every single day?
It is a profound challenge to the limits of our own empathy, and I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. Building on Kenna's philosophy of the adequate mother, it begs a terrifying question for all of us to consider about our own behavior. In the story of our lives, we are always the hero.
Right.
But if you were forced to look at your life strictly through the eyes of someone you deeply hurt, could you accept being the villain of their story if it was the only way they could survive?
Man, that is a question that will keep you up at night. You can't just look at a situation and neatly categorize who is the villain and who is the victim.
No, you really can't.
It is all just murky, painful, profoundly human gray areas. Well, that is all the time we have for today. Thank you for diving into the deep end with us, and we will catch you on the next one.